My family just arranged my marriage to my 13-year-old cousin. There's only one way to stop it. I was 23 when my family decided it was time for me to collect my first wife. They already had her picked out. My 13-year-old cousin, Zara, whose mother bragged about her early development. You see, every girl in my family knew the rule. The day you get your first period was the day you got married. It didn't matter whether you still played with dolls or couldn't reach the kitchen counter. If you could bleed, you could breed. That was the family motto passed down through generations like a cursed inheritance. I was 9 when I watched my oldest brother, Ahmed, get married to his first wife on his 21st birthday. She was 12 years old and looked terrified in her oversized wedding dress. By the time I was 15, Ahmed had buried that first wife and was on to his third. Pregnancy complications, everyone said. Too young, the doctors whispered. But nobody listened to doctors. Ahmed just shrugged when people asked about his dead wife. Allah's will, he'd say. Some flowers bloom and die quickly. Time to plant new seeds. Your wife's youth was like a currency in our community. Whichever man had the youngest, most obedient wife was the most praised by the elders. At family gatherings, my uncles would compete like kids comparing trading cards. The younger the bride, the higher the status. The more children she produced, the greater the respect. Amina was only 11 when I claimed her. Uncle Kareem would boast, showing photos of his child bride at family dinners. She couldn't even write her own name yet. In response, Uncle Hassan would lean back, smirking. That's nothing. I got my Yasmin at 10 and she still had her baby teeth. The jewelry shop didn't even make wedding rings that small. They'd laugh about having to buy rings from the children's toy section, about wives who needed step stools to reach the stove, about teaching them to cook before they learned algebra. For years, I played along, smiling when they discussed my future, agreeing that 14 was getting too old for a bride. Inside, my stomach churned with every conversation. But what could I do? Speaking against it meant exile from the family. And not just me. All the women in the family would be punished for my rebellion. The pressure mounted as I approached my mid-20s. Relatives started asking pointed questions. Are you waiting for her to grow old? Do you want damaged goods? Fresh fruit doesn't last forever. My mother showed me photos of potential brides, each one younger than the last, each one looking more like a child than the previous candidate. 3 months before my wedding date, I found Zara in our family's utility room with a bottle of bleach. Her hands were shaking so bad she couldn't open the child-proof cap. When she saw me, she dropped to her knees like she was begging for her life. Please don't tell. Please, I can't. I know what happens. I've seen what happens to the wives. She'd watched Ahmed's wives disappear one by one, seen the pregnancy announcements followed by funeral announcements, heard the whispered conversations about complications and narrow hips. I took the bottle from her trembling hands, sat on the floor next to her, and for the first time in my life, I said out loud what I'd been thinking for years. I know, I don't want this either. The words felt dangerous coming out of my mouth, like blasphemy against everything our family stood for. She sat there with her mouth wide open, staring at me like I had grown 5 heads. No adult had ever acknowledged her fear before. Everyone pretended this was normal and beautiful. Suddenly, she lunged at me for a hug, sobbing into my shoulder. I held this tiny girl who was supposed to become my wife and felt sick to my stomach. Can you please tell them I'm crazy? Tell them I'm possessed or cursed. They won't want me if I'm insane. Bad blood ruins the lineage. That sentence changed everything because she was absolutely right. My family obsessed over bloodlines, genetic purity, producing perfect sons to carry on the family name. Mental illness was the ultimate contamination. I'd seen them reject marriage proposals over rumors of a great aunt who talked to walls or a distant cousin who saw things that weren't there. Within a week, I started teaching Zara to perform madness, to twitch at dinner tables, mumble numbers in corners, scratch symbols on her arms with her fingernails until they bled. I coached her through episodes, taught her to roll her eyes back until only the whites showed, speak in gibberish, and claim she saw demons crawling in the wallpaper patterns. She put on such an award-winning performance that sometimes even I was disturbed by how convincing she looked. Her transformation was terrifyingly complete. My mother was horrified. She was perfect 2 weeks ago, she wailed to my father. Normal and healthy. Now look at her. What if it spreads to the other children? The wedding was quietly postponed while the family scrambled to understand what had happened to their perfect bride candidate. Doctors were consulted. Prayers were offered. Word spread through the girl cousins like wildfire. My sister Amira, 14 and recently bloomed, came to me next, begging to learn the same tricks. Then her friend Noor, then Noor's sister, then girls from neighboring families who'd heard whispered rumors about a way to escape the marriages. Before I knew it, I was running midnight coaching sessions in my car, teaching girls how to manifest madness convincingly enough to fool their own parents. Dead eyes are crucial, I'd instruct like some twisted acting coach. Stare through people, not at them. Laugh at nothing. Cry without reason. But timing is everything. Save the worst episodes for when marriage talks begin. Make them afraid you'll contaminate their precious bloodlines. Make them believe you're damaged goods nobody would want. Some girls were naturals at the performance. My cousin Ila developed a fictional friend she'd have full conversations with during family gatherings, serving tea to empty chairs. She'd scold invisible children for making messes, argue with the air about bedtime, set places at the table for people who didn't exist. Her performance was masterful. Others needed more intensive training. Soft-spoken Mariam couldn't sell the madness until I taught her to channel her real terror into fake hysteria hysteria and uncontrollable screaming. Think about your wedding night, I'd tell her quietly. Think about what they'll do to your body. Now scream like you're already living that nightmare. The sound she made after that coaching session convinced everyone she was genuinely disturbed. Even hardened family elders crossed themselves when she performed. Within 6 months, we had a full network of 15 marriageable girls, all displaying various forms of borderline schizophrenia and psychological disturbance. Family meetings turned to chaos as girls would trigger each other's episodes. One would start humming eerily, another would begin rocking violently back and forth. Suddenly, 3 would be speaking in unison about visions of black water rising and dead babies floating in the darkness. The imagery was deliberately disturbing. The elders panicked completely. They brought in healers who charged fortunes to wave burning incense around the afflicted girls and chant protective prayers. Doctors prescribed sedatives that the girls pretended to take. Religious leaders performed exorcisms that left the girls even more convincingly traumatized than before. I thought we could maintain the illusion indefinitely. The girls were protecting each other, with older ones coaching younger ones as they came of age. We had a system, and it was working beautifully. Marriage after marriage was postponed or canceled entirely due to concerns about defective bloodlines. But my family may have been traditional, but they weren't stupid. After a year of failed cures and mounting medical bills, they started noticing suspicious patterns. How the madness only struck marriageable girls between the ages of 10 and 16. How symptoms always peaked during wedding planning seasons. How I somehow was always nearby when the worst episodes occurred, offering comfort and support to the afflicted girls like some kind of savior. The final gathering happened on a Thursday night. 23 of us were at my uncle's house for his daughter's engagement party. She was 12 years old. The plan was to have her fake her worst episode yet during the ring ceremony right in front of the groom's family. Maximum impact for maximum protection. But when my uncle called her forward to receive her engagement blessing, she looked across the room and locked eyes with Zara, who nodded encouragingly. Suddenly, her hand reached into her pocket and she was downing over a dozen pills in one terrifying gulp. Real pills, not fake ones. We were forced to call the police and paramedics as she collapsed, convulsing on the Persian rug, foam bubbling from her mouth like she was dying. Sarah collapsed as paramedics burst through the door, her father screaming at her to vomit while she whispered the groom's age to the female EMT. The room erupted into complete chaos. Men scrambled for their phones, women shrieked prayers, and the younger girls pressed themselves against walls, eyes wide with terror. Uncle Hassan grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh hard enough to leave bruises. "You did this," he hissed while working his phone furiously. I caught a glimpse of his screen, a group chat titled Emergency Protocol with messages flying, damage control, scatter the evidence, protect the family. 20 pills, I shouted to the paramedics over the noise of prayers and screaming. She took 20 pills. I counted them fall from her hand. The EMT working on Sarah looked up sharply from where she was checking vitals. "How old is she?" she asked, and I watched every man in the room shift nervously. Their eyes darted between exits as they calculated escape routes. None of them wanted to answer that question to a mandated reporter with a badge. From across the room, Sarah's 11-year-old sister started signing frantically to the other girls in the code we'd developed during our secret training sessions. I recognized the gestures from our coaching. "Danger! Hide! Run!" The younger ones began edging toward the kitchen door like frightened animals sensing a predator. Then Zara did something that stopped everyone cold. She stood up straight, dropped her vacant stare, and spoke in a clear, strong voice for the first time in months. She took 20 pills because she's being sold to a 45-year-old man. Her words cut through the chaos like a knife through silk. The room exploded into violence. Fathers lunged for their daughters, dragging them toward exits. Tables overturned, sending food and decorations crashing to the floor. Someone's phone shattered against the tile floor. Through the chaos, I noticed one of the paramedics had pulled out her phone, snapping photos of the decorated engagement setup, the child-sized throne where Sarah was supposed to sit, the tiny wedding dress hanging in the background. The evidence was being documented. I had seconds to decide between saving my own skin and protecting the girls. Sarah was dying on the floor, her body convulsing as poison coursed through her system. The marriage contracts were still in Uncle Hassan's study upstairs. The evidence we'd collected over months was hidden in various locations throughout the house. But Sarah was dying, foam at her lips, her 12-year-old body fighting for life on the Persian carpet her grandmother had brought from the old country. I chose Sarah. I dropped to my knees beside the EMTs, rattling off everything I knew about her medical history, her allergies, the exact timing of when she'd taken the pills. Behind me, I heard car doors slamming as 3 girls were dragged away by their fathers. They disappeared into the night like ghosts, probably heading for family in other states. Police sirens wailed outside, growing louder as backup arrived. Through the window, I saw families scattering like roaches when lights flip on, carrying evidence and daughters. In the kitchen, smoke billowed up thick and acrid. Someone was burning documents in the sink, marriage contracts, birth certificates, anything that could be used against them. The acrid smell of burning paper mixed with the heavy incense that always accompanied our family gatherings and the sharp scent of fear sweat. Officer Martinez was first through the door. I'd seen him at community events before, before, knew he understood our culture's darker corners and hidden traditions. His eyes swept the scene methodically. The overturned furniture, the smoke, the young girls being hustled out through back doors like contraband. He called for backup immediately, specifically requesting the specialized unit that dealt with human trafficking and child abuse. He knew exactly what he was seeing. They lifted Sarah onto the gurney despite her unconscious state. Her right hand stayed clenched in a tight fist throughout the entire medical intervention. The female EMT tried to pry her fingers open to insert an IV, but Sarah's hand wouldn't budge. Even unconscious, she was holding on to something important. Uncle Hassan cornered me by the stairs while everyone focused on Sarah's medical emergency. His breath was hot on my face, smelling of cardamom and rage. "Every girl will pay for this betrayal," he said quietly so only I could hear. "Starting with your precious Zara. This is just the beginning of their punishment." Before I could respond, my mother appeared out of nowhere and slapped me hard across the face. The crack echoed through the room like a gunshot. "You've destroyed us," she screamed loud enough for everyone to hear. "Our family's honor. Centuries of tradition gone because of your Western weakness." I noticed several cousins had their phones out, live streaming her performance for social media. The family was already controlling the narrative, playing the victim. The EMTs wheeled Sarah toward the ambulance, fighting against time to save her life. As they maneuvered the gurney through the doorway, her clenched hand relaxed slightly. Something small and black fell onto the white sheet, a flash drive. The EMT picked it up, frowning at the label written in Sarah's careful 12-year-old handwriting. Insurance, it read in purple gel pen, the kind of pen little girls used to write in their diaries about crushes and dreams. Sarah's eyes fluttered open for just a moment as they loaded her into the ambulance. Her lips moved silently, no sound coming out, but I read the words clearly. "Check your car." Then her eyes rolled back and the doors slammed shut, taking her away from the family that had tried to sell her. The ambulance drove away with sirens screaming into the night, carrying a little girl who'd poisoned herself rather than submit to marriage to a man older than her father. Police were separating family members for questioning, but I watched Uncle Hassan speaking earnestly to one officer, gesturing at me with practiced concern. Other men nodded along, their stories already synchronized. They'd done this before, I realized. This wasn't their first time covering up the aftermath of rebellion. At the hospital, we discovered that Sarah's father had beaten us there. I found him at the nurses' station, speaking rapidly to the staff with desperate urgency. "She's been showing signs of mental illness for months," he insisted, his voice carrying the practiced tone of a rehearsed lie. "Delusions, paranoia, making up wild stories. She needs psychiatric hold for her own safety and the safety of others. She's been threatening violence, talking about demons, completely unstable." The nurse taking notes glanced at Sarah's chart, then at the bruises clearly visible on her unconscious arms, old bruises, fingerprint-shaped and yellowing with age. I tried to approach Sarah's room to check on her condition, but immediately hit a wall of hospital security guards blocking my path. Her father had already filed emergency paperwork with the hospital administration. "I'm sorry," the guard said, not unkindly but firmly. "Family only, and there's a note here that you're not to have contact." My phone buzzed non-stop with increasingly frantic messages from the network. 3 girls texting that they were being locked in basements for their own protection. Their fake madness was now being used as justification for imprisonment. "They say it's for our own good," Illa wrote, "until the episodes pass, but we know better." I ran to my car to check what Sarah had meant about looking there. Underneath, magnetic and covered in road grime, was a GPS tracker they'd been monitoring us. But that wasn't what she'd meant. In my glove compartment, wrapped in a plastic bag, was a notebook I'd never seen before filled with evidence. Sarah's 12-year-old handwriting filled every page with meticulous detail. Dates, names, ages, marriage contracts going back 5 years, deaths marked with red circles. My phone rang with an unknown number. A man's voice spoke with calculated menace. "You've been teaching young girls to lie, to corrupt their minds with fantasies. What kind of man spends time alone with little girls in his car at night?" The accusation hit like ice water, and I realized how they'd flip our story. Not a rescue network saving children from forced marriage, but a predator grooming vulnerable children for his own sick purposes. The perfect counter-narrative. Child services arrived at the hospital while I stood frozen in the parking lot, watching through glass doors as Uncle Hassan pulled out a prepared folder. Even from this distance, I could see official letterhead. Psychiatric evaluations, all dated months ago, before our network even started operating. All signed by the same name, Dr. Rashid, who'd married into the family 3 years prior and owed them favors. The fix was in from the beginning. I needed those marriage contracts from Uncle Hassan's house. The original documents that would prove what we were really fighting against, what the girls were really fleeing. I drove there knowing it was probably a trap, but having no choice. The house was dark except for his study window glowing like a beacon. I climbed through the back garden the way I had as a child, stealing sweets from grandmother's kitchen, moving carefully through the familiar shadows. The study door was cracked open invitingly. I slipped inside, phone ready to photograph everything that could serve as evidence of the systematic abuse. "I've been waiting for you." Zara's father sat in Uncle Hassan's chair, fingers steepled like a movie villain. "We need to discuss your limited options." My hand went instinctively to the door, but 2 of my cousins stepped out from behind it, blocking my escape route. I was trapped completely. "It's simple," he continued with practiced calm. calm. Marry Zara tomorrow properly, traditionally, and all charges will be dropped. This unfortunate misunderstanding will be forgotten. He pulled out his phone and played a recording of my voice, clear as day, alone with young girls in my car, teaching them to act disturbed. Without context, it sounded like something else entirely, something sick and predatory that would destroy me in court if a jury heard it. Coaching them to lie to their parents, he said, filling their heads with dangerous stories, meeting them secretly. What would police think about that? The imam arrived then, still wearing his formal robes from evening prayers. He looked at me with deep disappointment, like I'd personally betrayed God. This should be handled within our community, he said to Zara's father. These girls need spiritual guidance, not outside interference that corrupts their souls. One of the nurses from the hospital appeared in the doorway then, a young woman who'd been kind to me earlier when I'd tried to see Sarah. She leaned close to me as she passed, whispering urgently, "The imam's daughter disappeared when she was 14. Some say she ran away, some say other things happened." 3 families had already coordinated their stories with military precision. The girls were mentally ill, triggered by my dangerous Western influence and manipulation. I was a predator who'd taken advantage of their vulnerable conditions, twisting their natural fears into elaborate fantasies about forced marriage. The fake madness we'd created as protection was now being weaponized against us by the very people we'd been hiding from. My sister Amira had been pulled from school immediately. My mother posted photos on social media showing Amira's phone smashed on the kitchen floor. The caption expressed concerns about negative online influences and the importance of protecting our innocent children from outside corruption. Amira stood behind her in the photo, face blank with that dead-eyed stare I'd taught her, now serving their purposes instead of protecting her. I tried calling Aunt Rashida, the only adult family member who'd ever quietly questioned our marriage traditions behind closed doors. Her daughter answered the phone, whispering quickly and fearfully, "They put Mom on a plane to Yemen last night. She fought them hard, so they sedated her." The line went dead before I could ask more questions. Another voice of dissent silenced, another potential ally removed from the equation. Back at the hospital, a psychiatrist was evaluating Sarah while her father provided translation services, twisting every word that came from her mouth. I watched through a window as her father systematically reframed Sarah's desperate truth as symptoms of severe psychosis requiring long-term institutional care. Her accusations of forced marriage became delusions. Her fear of her family became paranoia. Her suicide attempt became proof of dangerous mental instability. I couldn't stand watching anymore. That Friday, I went to the mosque during crowded prayers when hundreds of men knelt in orderly rows. I stood up during the sermon and shouted the truth for everyone to hear. Sarah is being sold to a 45-year-old man. Our daughters are being trafficked as child brides. Hands grabbed me from all directions before I could say more. I was dragged out violently, thrown onto the concrete steps like garbage. Men I'd known my whole life stood over me, their faces twisted with rage and religious righteousness, but some younger men hung back, looking uncomfortable. A few women peering from the segregated women's section had tears in their eyes. The foundation was cracking, but I didn't know how much more damage we could take. As I picked myself up from the mosque steps, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number containing a photo that made my blood freeze. It showed Amira with that dead-eyed stare, now genuine trauma instead of performance, holding a sign. "My brother is sick. He made us all sick too." The war for our girls' freedom was escalating beyond anything I'd imagined, and I realized we were fighting an enemy with generations of experience covering up their crimes. Uncle Hassan started dating my ex-girlfriend Priya, showing up at my workplace with her draped on his arm like a trophy, wearing a gold necklace that matched the child-sized wedding rings. My coworkers noticed my shocked reaction when they walked into the cafe where I worked part-time to pay for college and law school preparation. Priya avoided eye contact while Uncle Hassan ordered coffee with exaggerated casualness, his arm possessively around her waist like he owned her. An anonymous report appeared at Child Protective Services the next day, claiming I had inappropriate access to minor females through my job and community activities. The social worker who called asked pointed questions about my time alone with young girls, my motivations for helping them, the nature of our private meetings. My manager overheard the conversation and told me to take the week off while they sorted things out with HR and conducted their own investigation. Back home, I discovered my childhood journals had been scattered across my bed like evidence at a crime scene, violated and contaminated. Pages I'd never written were inserted between real entries. The handwriting was close to mine, but not quite right when examined carefully. New passages described disturbing thoughts about young girls, fantasies that made my skin crawl and my stomach turn with revulsion at the implications. My mother stood in the doorway watching me read them with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just played a winning chess move. "I've been documenting your illness for years," she said with chilling calm, "just in case we ever needed proof. A mother knows when something's wrong with her son." The forgeries went back a decade, inserted into real journals with surgical precision. She'd been building this insurance policy since I was 13 years old. Every normal teenage thought had been twisted into something sinister through careful editing. Every interaction with female cousins reframed as predatory interest. My 7-year-old cousin Aliyah came to visit with her parents for what seemed like a normal family dinner, but nothing was normal anymore. During dinner, she announced to everyone everyone that I was sick like the other girls, reciting Uncle Hassan's exact words with the precision of a trained parrot. When her male teacher walked past our table at the restaurant later, she flinched dramatically and pressed herself against her mother like I'd trained her to do. The teacher noticed her reaction and frowned with concern, clearly wondering what trauma could cause such a response in such a young child. Security footage from Sarah's engagement party surfaced online, carefully edited to remove all context that would explain our actions or motivations. The video showed only me agitating young girls, teaching them to act strangely, without showing the marriage contracts or explaining why they needed to escape. Comments poured in calling me a monster, a predator, a sick man who corrupted innocent children for his own twisted purposes. My face became recognizable in our community as the man who corrupted innocent children, destroying my reputation and any chance of a normal life. The family lawyer filed for conservatorship over me, citing mental health concerns and my obvious danger to myself and vulnerable community members. The paperwork claimed I suffered from delusions that made me a danger, and they wanted complete control over my finances, medical decisions, and freedom of movement. I remembered my brother Ahmed's phone was still active on the family plan, and late at night I used his login to access the family WhatsApp group. The messages I found made my blood run cold with their casual discussion of evidence disposal and witness intimidation tactics. They were moving marriage contracts to a storage unit outside the city, with Uncle Hassan coordinating everything like a military operation. Different family members were assigned to transport specific documents, creating a paper trail that would be impossible to follow or reconstruct. Ahmed's last message before his death caught my eye and made me realize something terrible. He'd been asking questions about his first wife's accident. The group chat had gone completely silent after that message. 3 days later, Ahmed died in what investigators ruled was an accidental car crash. I needed the storage unit location, but that meant breaking into Uncle Hassan's email account, and the password reset went to his monitored phone. I'd have to get close to him somehow, which seemed impossible given the restraining orders and constant surveillance they maintained. My childhood best friend Kareem worked as a police officer now. He found me at the park where we used to play as kids, looking around nervously. "There's a warrant coming," he said quietly, glancing over his shoulder. "Federal investigation. They think you're running some kind of cult operation. You should leave town tonight," he advised. But I couldn't abandon the girls, not when they were still trapped and suffering because of my failed rescue attempt. I gathered all the evidence I had and went to the local news station, hoping someone would listen to the truth and investigate properly. The reporter seemed interested initially, taking notes and asking follow-up questions, until I mentioned which specific families were involved in the trafficking. Her expression changed completely. She made excuses about needing to verify facts, but I later learned the station owner's daughter had married into one of the allied families. The story died before it could even begin, killed by the same network that had been silencing victims for generations. Sarah's condition worsened in the hospital as doctors fought to save her life. She needed emergency surgery, but her parents refused consent. They wouldn't sign the papers until she recanted her lies about the forced marriage and admitted she'd made everything up for attention. The doctors were bound by law and could only watch as she deteriorated, her 12-year-old body shutting down while her parents played power games. 5 allied families mobilized like a well-trained army, making girls vanish from schools overnight and mothers quit their jobs to provide homeschooling. The entire community closed ranks, protecting their traditions with military precision, while social media filled with posts about protecting children from dangerous influences. I realized this network extended far beyond my immediate family. The practice wasn't dying out in the modern world. It was organizing, adapting, becoming more sophisticated. At 3 a.m., someone knocked urgently on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw Zara, still in her nightgown, clutching a small bag. I opened the door and she stumbled inside, her face streaked with tears of genuine terror. They moved up the wedding. She gasped between sobs. "Tomorrow morning at sunrise. I stole these." She opened her bag to show birth control pills just in case I couldn't escape in time. Her brothers would track her to my apartment soon. We both knew it. I gave her my car keys and all the cash I had hidden in my apartment. "Drive to the women's shelter on Madison Street," I told her urgently. "Ask for Jennifer. She knows our situation and will help you disappear safely." "Come with me," she begged, grabbing my arm. "We can both run. Start over somewhere far away where they'll never find us." "They'll follow me," I explained. "You have a better chance alone. Go now before they realize you're missing and start the search." 20 minutes after she left, her brothers arrived at my door with predictable efficiency. They'd been monitoring my building, waiting for her to make contact. They dragged her from my car just 2 blocks away from safety. She broke character completely, screaming the truth about the forced marriages. One of them covered her mouth to muffle her cries while neighbors watched from windows, but no one intervened to help a young girl being kidnapped. Uncle Hassan visited me the next morning with a simple ultimatum delivered in his calm, measured voice. "Leave the country today or stay and watch Zara's wedding tonight." I refused to abandon her, which sealed both our fates. That evening, they married her to a man twice her father's age in a ceremony I couldn't get close to. Someone live-streamed parts of the wedding, and I watched in horror as Zara stood like a statue, the dead-eyed stare now real instead of performed. Sarah's nurse approached me in the hospital cafeteria cafeteria the next day. Not my ex-girlfriend, but a different woman who rolled up her sleeve to show old scars. "Chains," she said simply, pointing to marks around her ankle. "I escaped a similar situation 10 years ago. I've been documenting everything happening here." She revealed the truth that made my stomach drop with the scope of the conspiracy. 3 families across 3 states practiced this tradition, all interconnected through strategic marriages. They'd created a web of abuse spanning generations, with every girl I thought I'd saved already assigned to specific matches in other states. Our madness strategy had just reshuffled the deck, pushing younger girls forward to replace the ones marked as defective, accelerating the timeline instead of stopping it. My mother cornered me at home with an ultimatum that destroyed my remaining hope. Testify that the girls are mentally ill, that you manipulated them, or watch Amira suffer. My sister stood behind her with that dead stare I'd taught her, but now it reflected genuine trauma instead of protective performance. "She's lying," Amira said mechanically, "but she'll make me say it's true. They've broken her spirit completely, turned her into their puppet." I refused to betray the girls. So within hours, my mother filed a police report using the fabricated journal entries as evidence of my long-term psychological deterioration. The investigation opened immediately with federal resources, treating me as a dangerous cult leader rather than investigating the real crimes being committed against children. Paranoid now, I started recording every interaction with hidden cameras and audio devices, becoming like them in my constant documentation and evidence gathering. I confronted my father at his workplace about Ahmed's first wife, ignoring his co-workers who pretended not to notice our heated conversation. "She was too weak," he finally admitted with a shrug. "Some girls just can't handle their duties. Ahmed knew the risks when he married her." "She was 12 years old," I said, and he replied without hesitation, "She was ready." The family decided she was mature enough for marriage and motherhood. The storage unit location came from an unexpected source when the family doctor who'd signed the psychiatric evaluations approached me outside the mosque. His own daughter had just turned 11 and gotten her first period. "I'll tell you where the documents are," he said desperately, "if you promise to protect her too." But when I arrived at the storage unit, security footage showed Uncle Hassan had already removed everything, having anticipated betrayal from within the family. Kareem couldn't delay my arrest any longer as federal investigators built their case against me as a cult leader who'd brainwashed young girls into madness. The family's narrative was winning in court and public opinion, painting me as the villain in a story where I'd tried to be the hero. 3 girls attempted suicide on the same night in different states. 2 succeeded, unable to face their predetermined futures. Ela was one of them. At her funeral, I stood to speak about the truth of her death, but male relatives physically restrained me while her father gave a prepared speech. He spoke about mental illness, about protecting our children from dangerous outside influences, staring at me the entire time like I'd personally murdered his daughter. Child Services removed me from the approved visitor list for all minor relatives after the family claimed I was mentally incompetent and dangerous around children. The social worker apologized, saying the family seemed very concerned about my influence, having no idea she was enabling a systematic trafficking operation. My bank accounts were frozen after the family claimed I was mentally incompetent and stealing from them, cutting off my access to years of savings. I couldn't afford a lawyer for my defense. The public defender assigned to my case was overwhelmed and uninterested in the cultural complications involved. The nurse Priya revealed the worst news yet. Zara's wedding hadn't been just a ceremony, but payment for a debt between families. A previous child bride had died during childbirth, and blood money was owed. Zara was the settlement, traded like livestock to balance the books. I finally snapped completely. I broke into the venue where another child wedding was happening, live streaming everything on social media for the world to see. The bride looked no older than 12, dressed in white like a doll. I broadcast for 3 minutes before being struck unconscious by the groom's brothers. 50,000 people saw the stream before it cut off, spreading evidence of child marriage across social media platforms faster than the family could contain it. I woke up in the hospital with a concussion and assault charges filed by Zara's new husband, who claimed I'd attacked innocent wedding guests. Zara visited me once, a black eye poorly covered with makeup. "I fell down the stairs," she said mechanically, while her husband watched from the doorway. Uncle Hassan visited next, showing me a video on his phone that had been edited to make our rescue sessions look like grooming sessions with vulnerable children. "This is what the jury will see," he said calmly. "Your confession would be better for everyone, including the girls you claim to care about." That night, Amira managed to sneak me a message written on a candy wrapper, passed through a sympathetic nurse who believed something was wrong. "I remember everything," the tiny handwriting read. "They made me lie about you. The girls are being moved to different states. Help us before it's too late." To save Amira from being married off as punishment for my rebellion, I made the hardest choice of my life. I would confess to conspiracy charges. I admitted to brainwashing the girls and filling their heads with anti-marriage propaganda, but refused to confess to any sexual abuse that hadn't happened. My lawyer said it was the best deal I'd get under the circumstances. 2 years in prison versus 20, with the understanding that I'd stay away from the community. During my transport to holding, I found something in the evidence box that made my blood freeze solid. A marriage ledger with my name listed as Zara's husband. The signature was perfect, forged using documents from my car loan application. confession. They'd made me complicit in my own cousin's trafficking even while I sat in jail. Sarah's surgery deadline approached rapidly. 6 hours, the doctor warned, or she'd face permanent organ damage that would affect her for life. Her parents still wouldn't consent to life-saving treatment unless I signed a statement taking full blame for her mental breakdown and suicide attempt. I understood Uncle Hassan's real goal then. My confession would invalidate every girl's testimony in any future legal proceedings. They'd all be dismissed as coached lies. The madness strategy we'd created to protect them would be used to prove they were mentally incompetent witnesses whose words couldn't be trusted. The court-appointed psychiatrist evaluated me while my family submitted years of fabricated evidence about my deteriorating mental state and dangerous obsessions. The doctor's questions seemed coached, leading me toward specific admissions about my relationship with the girls and my motivations for helping them. I had to convince him I was sane while everything in my file pointed to elaborate delusions about forced marriage and systematic family abuse. To save Sarah's life, I agreed to plead guilty to the conspiracy charges, but as I signed the confession, I added a coded message in the margins, written in Arabic script. Only the girls who'd attended our training sessions would understand it. The sparrow still flies at midnight, our emergency activation phrase. Sarah got her surgery and survived the medical crisis, but when she woke up, a marriage certificate waited on her bedside table, dated for her 16th birthday. The confession I'd signed was already being used to discredit all Child Protective Services investigations into the family's marriage practices. The psychiatric evaluations would be used to institutionalize the most rebellious girls for their own safety and the safety of others. 3 were committed immediately for shared psychotic disorder, allegedly caused by my influence. The treatment included memory suppression therapy designed to erase their experiences. They were being systematically erased, their memories of abuse deleted through chemical intervention and psychological manipulation. Priya lost her job at the hospital after family members filed complaints about her obsession with their culture and inappropriate interest in their family dynamics. She was branded a troublemaker who couldn't respect cultural differences. The hospital quietly let her go rather than deal with the controversy. In jail awaiting trial, I met my cellmate Yusuf. His daughter had died in our family network at 15, officially from pregnancy complications. He'd been planning revenge for 3 years, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to expose what had really happened to his child. He showed me photos that made me vomit. His daughter's body showed signs of violence, not medical complications. The injuries were consistent with abuse, not childbirth. The death certificate was signed by the same doctor who'd been signing psychiatric evaluations for troubled girls. Same patterns, same cover-up methods. I traded commissary items to get Yusuf's girlfriend to visit the institutionalized girls as a volunteer art teacher, hoping to maintain contact. She recognized the signs of trauma immediately. The girls were heavily drugged but still fighting, leaving coded messages in their artwork for anyone who could read them. Prison visitor logs revealed that Uncle Hassan had been visiting specific inmates regularly. All were convicted of domestic murders involving their wives. He was recruiting, building a network of men who'd already proven they could kill their wives and get away with it, creating an army of enforcers. To get evidence out of prison, I had to attack a guard and extend my sentence, ensuring the disciplinary hearing where I could slip photos to a board member. During the hearing, I passed photos to a female board member who was a mandated reporter. She recognized the cultural markers and understood what she was seeing. That night, Yusuf died in a prison accident. His bed collapsed, crushing him. His testimony about his daughter's murder would never be heard in court. The evidence he'd gathered over 3 years disappeared from his cell. Guards claimed they'd never seen any documents or photographs. Uncle Hassan's new strategy was revealed through intercepted letters. He was arranging marriages between institutionalized girls and prisoners who needed citizenship. The marriages could happen without the girls even being present. Mental illness made wives unable to testify against their husbands in court proceedings. It was a perfect system. Every protection we'd built became a weapon against the girls we'd tried to save from forced marriage. The documented mental illness invalidated all testimony. The fake madness we'd performed was now real trauma that silenced them forever. A federal investigation finally opened, but it focused on me as a cult leader, not the family as traffickers of children. The narrative was set in stone. I was the villain who'd driven innocent girls insane with my delusions about forced marriage and family abuse. Yusuf's photos haunted me even after his death. The matching injuries on his daughter and Ahmed's first wife pointed to a specific killer. Someone had signed both marriage certificates with the same elegant script. I cross-referenced the signatures with Sarah's notebook entries from the storage unit. The same handwriting appeared on 12 death certificates over 15 years. Young wives who died from pregnancy complications that looked suspiciously like violence. 2 institutionalized girls managed to communicate through their art therapy sessions, despite the heavy medication designed to suppress their memories. Their paintings showed recurring symbols that matched our training. A sparrow at midnight, just like my coded message. The network was still active. The volunteer art teacher smuggled out their work. One painting depicted a storage shed behind an old training ground with specific landmarks. Another showed numbers that looked like coordinates, GPS locations where evidence might be hidden or where girls might be taken taken for transport, prison visitor logs revealed more disturbing patterns. Uncle Hassan wasn't just visiting convicted murderers randomly. He was specifically targeting men whose wives had died within a year of marriage, men who'd walked free on technicalities, men who understood the system. I watched helplessly as the institutionalized girls' marriages were processed with bureaucratic efficiency. The paperwork was flawless, covering every legal requirement. Psychiatric evaluations declaring them incompetent to make decisions. Family consent as legal guardians. Citizenship applications for the foreign grooms. 3 girls were married while sedated in their hospital beds, unable to speak or move, their hands guided to sign documents they couldn't read. Then something unexpected happened that changed everything. Sarah escaped from medical transport, disappearing like smoke into the night. The van carrying her to a long-term psychiatric facility reported an empty gurney at their destination. Security footage showed her escape during a bathroom stop. She'd unstrapped herself and slipped out through an unlocked window while the guards waited outside, vanishing into the city like a ghost. Within hours, she was live streaming from a hidden location, her hospital gown dirty and torn, but her voice clear and strong. "I'm in the shed where it all began," she said to her phone camera. Behind her, I recognized the utility room where I'd first found Zara with the bleach. They think I'm crazy. They think we're all crazy, but I remember everything. Every marriage, every death, every girl who tried to escape. The family manhunt began immediately. Uncle Hassan coordinated search teams like a military operation, while my prison transport took an unexpected detour. We drove past the search area, and through the barred windows I watched family members combing through neighborhoods with practiced efficiency. Sarah's live stream continued sporadically throughout the night. She showed pages from hidden notebooks, marriage contracts she'd photographed before the raid. Her viewership climbed steadily. 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 people watching a young girl expose generational abuse in real time. Then an unexpected storm hit the area. Torrential rain flooded the old training ground where Sarah was hiding in the underground utility room. Water rose quickly in the low-lying area. She had to leave the shed or drown as the storm drains backed up and overflowed. Her live stream showed her wading through knee-deep water, hypothermia setting in, nowhere safe to go with both family and police searching. Both the family search party and sympathetic community members raced to find her first, creating a tense standoff in the flooded streets. I pressed my face against the transport bus window, recognizing the streets, knowing exactly where she'd go next for shelter. The bridge over the river where we used to feed ducks as children. The same place Ahmed used to take us before his first wife died. The bus driver, a woman who'd been watching the situation unfold on her phone, made an unauthorized stop for a bathroom emergency. She parked within view of the bridge, and I saw them converge from different directions like armies meeting on a battlefield. Uncle Hassan's car approached from one direction, a women's shelter van from another. Sarah stood on the bridge railing, soaked and shivering. She looked down at the churning water below, swollen from the storm, calculating her chances of survival versus capture. Both vehicles screeched to a halt. "Come down, Habibi!" Uncle Hassan called out, his voice carrying even through the bus windows. "You're sick," he continued with false concern. "We'll help you get better. Just come down from there safely." Sarah looked directly at his car, then at the shelter van. She pulled something from her pocket, a flash drive on a chain around her neck. "I'm not crazy," she said clearly, her words picked up by her still streaming phone propped on the bridge rail. Then she jumped into the freezing water, choosing potential death over certain captivity. The current was strong, swollen from the storm. Both rescue teams dove in after her, but the churning water was too powerful. I watched Uncle Hassan wade in up to his chest before being pulled back. The women from the shelter threw ropes that fell short of reaching her. Sarah's body was swept downstream and out of sight. Her body was never found. The family claimed she'd been mentally ill, driven to suicide by delusions implanted by my manipulation. Others whispered that she'd been pulled from the water downstream by sympathetic fishermen and smuggled across the border to safety. Her live stream had cut off when her phone hit the water, leaving her fate unknown but her evidence preserved in the cloud. My sister Amira did something extraordinary that same day. While the family searched for Sarah, she led child services to grandfather's grave. The headstone was loose, just as Sarah had indicated in her final stream. Beneath it, wrapped in plastic, were hundreds of marriage certificates. The documents revealed the truth that shattered everything. Certificates dating back 60 years, showing the scope of the family's trafficking operation. My mother's name was on one of the first certificates, married at 11 to my father. My grandmother's showed she was 10 when she was wed. Every woman in our family was both victim and perpetrator, trapped in a generational cycle that turned the abused into abusers. Their signatures appeared on their daughters' certificates years later, complicit in perpetuating what had been done to them as children. The evidence was overwhelming but complicated. Prosecuting meant destroying women who'd been victims themselves, conditioned to perpetuate their own abuse. The younger generation could be saved, but only by condemning mothers and grandmothers who'd had no choice in their own childhood fates. During my trial, I sat as the sole defendant while the family walked free. The prosecutor painted me as a cult leader who'd driven vulnerable girls to madness. My public defender barely tried to counter the narrative. The confession I'd signed was the star evidence, impossible to overcome despite the circumstances. But something was happening outside outside the courtroom. The live streams had spread beyond our isolated community to the wider world. Other girls in similar situations began faking mental illness using our techniques. The madness defense went viral in closed forums and whisper networks. 6 months into my 5-year sentence, postcards started arriving. No signatures, just coordinate. The first location was a women's shelter in Canada. More postcards followed from different locations: Seattle, Portland, Vancouver. The Underground Railroad had evolved and adapted, spreading north. The institutionalized girls began recovering suppressed memories despite the chemical therapy designed to erase their experiences. Their artwork grew bolder, messages clearer. One girl escaped during a supervised outing, following symbols other survivors had left in public spaces. Prison visitors brought news from outside. 3 more families had seen their marriageable daughters develop sudden mental illness. The symptoms were spreading faster than the families could contain them. Psychiatric wards filled with girls performing madness so convincingly that experts struggled to distinguish performance from trauma. Uncle Hassan visited me once in prison during my 2nd year. He looked older, grayer, defeated in ways I'd never seen before. "The bloodline is polluted now," he said quietly, staring at his hands. "No one wants our daughters anymore. They're all considered defective." I said nothing, but we both understood the truth. The madness strategy had worked too well, creating a generation unmarriageable by their standards. The very purity the families obsessed over had been contaminated beyond repair by our resistance. Priya, the nurse, started a new job at a women's clinic in another state. She sent coded messages through approved channels. Former victims were becoming nurses, teachers, social workers. They were embedding themselves in systems where they could identify and help others escape. The family's financial structure began collapsing as the dowries and bride prices that funded their lifestyle dried up completely. Younger men refused marriages to defective girls. The elder generation found themselves without the generational wealth transfer they depended on. My mother visited once during my 3rd year, looking haunted. She didn't speak about the certificates found in grandfather's grave, but her eyes held a recognition that hadn't been there before. She left commissary money and never returned, cutting contact completely. 2 years into my sentence, Ahmed's hidden phone received a message that changed everything. A young girl claiming to be his daughter from his 2nd wife. She was 12, the same age her mother had been when married. She was asking for help, having heard whispers about the network. I taught my cellmate the signs to look for, the code words to spread. He taught others when he was released, creating ripples. Guards' daughters learned to twitch at dinner tables. The strategy spread through prison visitors to communities we'd never reached. By year 3, psychiatric hospitals had adapted, developing new protocols for distinguishing performed madness from genuine illness. But the girls adapted too, their performances evolving, becoming more sophisticated. It became an arms race between detection and deception. Some girls were caught and forced into marriages anyway. Others disappeared into the growing network of safe houses and sympathetic families. Justice was partial, imperfect, Pyrrhic. For every girl saved, another was lost. But the system persisted, weakened and corrupted from within. Uncle Hassan's final visit came in my 4th year. He sat across from me in the visiting room, hands trembling with age or rage. "You destroyed us," he said with quiet fury. "Centuries of tradition gone because of your Western corruption." "No," I replied calmly. "You destroyed yourselves the day you decided daughters were property to be sold." He left without another word. I heard later he'd moved back to the old country where traditions still held strong. But even there, whispers of the madness defense were spreading through women's networks, carried by immigrants and refugees. The art teacher continued visiting institutionalized girls, slowly helping them reduce medications and sharpen their minds through therapeutic intervention. 2 more girls escaped over the years. 3 others aged out of marriageable range while institutionalized, saved by time if not by justice. On my release day, no family waited for me, but a van from a halfway house was there, driven by a woman with familiar, intelligent eyes. She didn't speak until we were miles from the prison. "Sarah says hello," she said quietly. "She's studying to be a lawyer now, Canadian law." The halfway house was full of men like me, brothers, cousins, uncles who'd chosen their daughter's freedom over family honor. We shared strategies, evolved the network, prepared for the next generation's fight. The resistance had become institutional, organized, permanent. I found work at a warehouse, lived quietly, stayed off social media, but the postcards kept coming, each one representing a girl saved, a life reclaimed. The madness strategy had become bigger than any of us, a viral defense against ancient violence that couldn't be contained or controlled. 5 years after that Thursday gathering, I stood outside the mosque where I'd been thrown down the steps for speaking truth. The building was for sale, the congregation scattered. Inside, a few old men prayed to emptiness while their world crumbled around them. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, a photo of a young girl in a graduation cap holding a law degree. In the background, barely visible but unmistakable, was Sarah, alive, free, fighting the system from within as a legal advocate. The war for our girls' freedom wasn't over. It had evolved, gone underground, spread beyond our control or theirs. Some battles we'd won, others we'd lost, but in teaching girls to perform madness, we'd given them something precious. The knowledge that resistance was possible, that traditions could be broken, that sometimes the crazy ones were the sanest of all.